Lots of people talk about chasing their dreams, but how many actually do it? Welcome to the Pursue Your Passion podcast with Tyler Kamerman. We're going to introduce you to people who are intentionally pursuing their passion every day. Through their stories of success and their struggles, you'll gain insight into how to better begin or continue your journey. Now here's Tyler with today's guest.
What's up, passion pursuers? This is Tyler Kamerman, your host, with you for a solo cast this morning. We've had a few great guests on recently: Taufik Shah, Sarah Null Wilson, and Nick Linners. All great conversations, and I love the thoughts, I love the feelings, I love the passion that they brought to those interviews. And so we're just going to spend some time diving into some of my key takeaways. I know I've gotten feedback from you guys that these are helpful, but I also hope that it encourages you to go back and listen to those episodes, especially if you're jumping in for the first time, or maybe you missed one. And I just hope that by recapping some of what I see as the high points, that encourages you to go back and listen to that episode. And ultimately, it's my hope that this is encouraging you along on your journey. With that in mind, I'd love to hear from more of you. What steps have you taken? What knowledge have you gleaned from this show that's helped you on your journey? What have you put into practice that's helped move the needle? That's all great stuff. And, I just want to give a shout out to friends of the show, friends that are introducing me to new people. I'm excited about the guests that I've got coming up for you guys to talk to or to hear from, that I get to talk to. And I'm just having a blast with this. This has been so life-giving for me to be able to connect with new people, to be able to share stories with you all. And I'm just grateful that you're along for the ride. So let's jump into it. I love when the guests have new things to share with me about finding your passion. What worked for them and what recommendations or what advice they have for people that are trying to find that passion. And one thing that came up was find what you spend the most time on. And then if you put the effort in, you can figure it out. I think that's something that we've heard before. Like if you're in a spot where you're trying to figure out what to do, right? Like, where is my passion? Take a look at what you spend the most time on. And then another comment, enjoy the exploration. There is as much value in figuring out what you don't like as there is in figuring out what you do like. And Sarah used the example of an eye exam. And I'm guessing most of us have had an eye exam. If not, it might be a little bit time consuming to try to explain it. But if you think about when you get to the point where they're like option A, option B, or 1 or 2, depending on your eye doctor, it's 1 or 2 or A or B or C, but it's flicking different lenses. And, as you're working through that exploration, it really is just as important to figure out what you don't like as much as it is what you do like. Another thing that came up is a reminder that your passion can come from a flicker. It doesn't have to be a red hot flame. Sometimes something just grabs you, and you hear these stories of people that, it was just obvious. I mean, they had this burning desire to do what they were doing. And so they started chasing it, and they had success, or they didn't, but it was very obvious to them. For other people, it might be this thing on the side that keeps coming up. It may not just jump out and slap you in the face, but it's something that's always been there, or it's something that is a consistent in your life. It doesn't always have to burn red hot. The red hot might come later, or it might be a slow burn the whole time. But passion is important. It keeps you focused. It keeps you fueled, especially when you start hitting those hard times. It's important to have that passion behind what you're doing in order to keep one foot moving in front of the other. And again, that's one of the big points of me doing this show, is to help. I mean, it started with me. I needed to refocus on what I was passionate about, what was helping to keep me driving forward. And that just led me to want to help people find and do the same thing. So Taufik said, confidence, if I put 100% of my effort into this thing that I truly love, it's going to be something big. And the point there was that it's important to have confidence, but as I sat and thought about that, sometimes we don't have confidence, right? We don't have, we're lacking that. I know this is going to work. But I do love what Tafik said, find that thing that you truly love and then put 100% effort into it. And maybe the something big isn't going to be big by the world's standards, but it will be big to you. If you're lacking confidence, if you move forward and put 100% of your effort into that thing, no matter what comes out of it, you're going to learn, and that's going to help propel you to the next thing that's important to you. On that same point, Sarah added an interesting golden nugget, as I like to call it. When you're able to gain clarity, that clarity almost always leads to conviction, and conviction is what leads to confidence. So I think those two comments couple really well together because, again, if you're lacking confidence, if you're not, if you're not somebody that has experience in going after things and really putting yourself out there, focus on that. Focus on, how do I gain clarity? Because when you have that clarity, that's going to build that conviction inside of you. And then that conviction is going to lead to confidence. And I think about, for me, stepping into this new role with many hands, like there was when we first started talking about the job, I think maybe there was a lack of clarity on, well, not a lack of clarity, but I needed to learn about the mission. I had like I'd been around it. I had an idea of what I needed to do. But when I had the opportunity to get to Haiti, when I had the opportunity to spend time with Tim and really learn his passion, now I started gaining that clarity, which then instilled in me the conviction to go out and do what I needed to do. And because I have that conviction, now I have confidence to go out and talk to anybody about our mission. And so, when Sarah said that, I immediately thought of my own journey over the last 4 months with many hands and how that's been applicable to me. And then I love what these guests had to say as far as, just do it, as I like to say. Again, stealing Nike's slogan, but, really a lot of times we just have to get out and do it. We've got this idea. We can, sit in analysis paralysis. We can overthink like we always do. And sometimes we just have to get out and do it. But, I love, it was Tafik that said, put in the time outside an 8 to 5. So a lot of times, we've talked about, sometimes the passion is your full-time job, but many times it's not. Many times it is just a side hustle. And so like with his situation, with lots of people's situations, it's, hey, I've got to keep working this 8 to 5. So let's start with a couple of hours outside of work. Now, in Tafik's situation, that turned into work until 2 a.m. some nights. That's not something I'm going to prescribe. Not everybody can, run off of 4 or 5 hours of sleep, but it was a matter of just, hey, I'm going to start with an hour. I'm going to start with 2 hours outside of work to get this thing going. And, anytime we take risks, we grow, and I think that that's a huge lesson as well. And another thing that came up is, as adults, we don't do enough things that we're bad at. John Acuff wrote a book called Soundtracks, and a mantra that he and his family live by is, be brave enough to be bad at something. And when you think about that, like I just said, as adults, we don't do enough things that we're bad at. We get in our routines. We want to help our kids. We want to encourage our kids to take chances. We want to encourage our kids to do new things. But we as adults so infrequently actually do new things because we're afraid at being bad at something. So, my brain just starts reeling there. It's like, take an improv class, write a poem, join a karate dojo, learn a foreign language, like do something that pushes you outside of your comfort zone, because we're just so, yeah, I've said it twice already. As adults, we're just so afraid to do anything that we're bad at. And if we want to model that for our kids, what better to do than say, hey, I'm going to take this. You're going to take piano lessons. I'm going to take piano lessons. I've never played the piano before, so clearly I'm going to suck at it. Model that for your kids. Show your kids that it's okay to take chances, and help them figure out that it's okay to fail also. As we're on this journey pursuing our passions, and I've, I mentioned this a lot, but and another part of it is sticking with it. You know, we we're gonna hit the hard times. We're gonna hit challenges. And I love that all three of these guests had very similar thoughts on facing their challenges. Our ability to solve problems and figure out the challenges is what determines whether or not we're successful. One thought. Once I became very clear about what I wanted to do and stayed flexible with it, and stayed flexible with we'll figure it out, the idea of we'll figure it out, the big challenges have been infrequent. Third thought, facing challenges. Keep an open mind and watch for opportunity. So all three of these folks are, look at it like, hey, you got to keep the mile high overview, especially when you get hit with problems. Number one, because you have to be able to see above those problems and see outside of those problems. But I also love that staying flexible was something that two of the three mentioned as well. I know for me, not I think, I know for me, I get real rigid when I run into a problem. And that's something that now that I'm at a role where I have to think more strategically, that staying flexible is huge. We get stuck in a rut, and even just in our day to day, we kind of run in our own lane, right? But when problems get thrown at us, we tend to duck and cover. And it's really at those times that we need to be the most open to new ideas and staying flexible, because that's how we're going to move through those things. So, as you're chasing your passion, as you're going after it, keep in mind that problems are going to come, but that's when we grow the most. And those are the times where, if you're not already seeking outside help, that's the point where you need to go, okay, what are my resources? How do I stay flexible here? How do I get through this? Because I know on the other side, there's going to be growth. There's a mantra, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I think it's also important, and this is a part of the conversation as well. A lot of times you have to sprint in order to truly get something off the ground. Now, that doesn't mean sprinting at the beginning. We've talked a lot about, just going out and doing something. It doesn't mean the minute your boots hit the ground, you got to start sprinting, right? But at some point, and Brian Tracy talks about this in one of his books, in order for a jet to take off, it's got to get up to full speed. Now, that doesn't mean, maybe you need to taxi for a while, right? But at some point, you're going to have to put in probably an uncomfortable amount of effort to get that plane off the ground. Once the plane gets to, cruising altitude, it's not like it slows down, but if you're on a plane, it feels like it's doing a lot less work, right? So yes, it's a marathon. It's always a long journey to get to where we want to go, but there are points that we do have to sprint to get there. But another piece that I love, and this is something that you've probably heard before, but we overestimate what we can do in a short time, and we underestimate what we can do over a longer period of time. Meaning, a lot of times we are like, oh yeah, I can get that, get XYZ done in 30 days, but it turns out we can only get X done. But then when we try to look out, we tend to underestimate. We're like, oh no, I could never get that done in 5 years or a year. And so I think that piece comes back to, really being open-minded, being strategic when it comes to our goals, right? Like we need to sit down and we need to set short-term goals and we need to set long-term goals, but we also need to look at how those goals flow into each other. And I think that, just that piece, we underestimate what we can do over a long period of time. Just go back and listen to really any of the guests that I've had on the show, and they're almost all of them are examples of that. It's how it seems like it's going to be a long time before success comes, but a lot of times we are underestimating what we can actually accomplish if we look at things for a long time. Some other thoughts that came up from these conversations, I think, flow into when you get to that point that you're managing people, when you're starting to grow a team, or maybe, you're already managing a team. And I just thought there were some really great thoughts that would fall into that as well. Make your employees and your clients a priority. I think too many businesses, they get too focused. The customer's always right, right, and that mindset was around for a long time. The problem is that's usually at the expense of your employees. So making your employees and your clients a priority. And I think there's been a shift kind of in management where, your employees are your number one client. If you treat them right, they're going to treat your clients right. But I think it's a balance. And based on these conversations, I think that, these guests kind of fall in line with that as well. You need to make them both a priority. And I had the opportunity, thank you, Mom. My whole family went down to Orlando a few weeks ago, and I I had been set up for the level of customer service that Disney provides, but it's really incredible. And the employees that we interacted with genuinely seemed happy to be there as well. So, like, say what you will about Disney Corporation, I feel like the parks themselves, they are doing it right. As a customer, as a consumer, what an amazing experience. But like I said, the employees that we interfaced with all seemed genuinely happy to be there as well. So something in their mantra, something in the way they do things is definitely definitely working. Another thought that was brought up is create an environment where people want to work. Try to make work more meaningful. And Nick is the one that said that, and I love his approach to, building a meat market, a butcher shop. It's finding the importance in the work that you do. And he went on to say, as you're managing people, if it's not important to your people, find out what is, or help them try to find the importance in what they're doing. If you see an employee that isn't motivated, help them find the importance in what they're doing, or help them find something else. Because if they, it doesn't matter what the job is. If a person that you're managing doesn't see the importance in what they're doing, if you don't help them find it, or help them find something else, they're going to go find it on their own. So, your job in managing people is, well, there's lots of jobs in managing people, right? But one of those, to this specific point, is helping them find the importance in what they're doing. I mean, we all want to feel like our job matters. That's just, I shouldn't say we all. I think most people want to feel that their job matters, that they're making a difference. And so if we can help them find that, that's just huge. And then just in life in general, be an encourager. There's so many negative influences. We're just bombarded with difficult things on a daily basis. And you can make a difference in the world just by encouraging people. I have a note in my journal where that I write in the mornings, encourage one person every day. And I think if we can all, and I brought that up, on this show before, but making that shift to make sure that we're encouraging at least one person every day, that changes things, and if we can not only encourage that person, but then ask them to, hey, go encourage somebody else today. Or if you don't have the bandwidth today, keep that in the back of your mind so that when you do, you can start moving that forward. And if we do that in the workplace, if we do that in, outside of work, if we do that all over, it makes an impact. And one of my mentors just started a podcast, Encourage the Encouragers. And Mitch Matthews, new podcast for him. It's already, busting through the charts. So, that's a great one to jump on board with as well. Talking about outside, some other things that you can take encouragement from, some books that came up from these conversations. I always like to reiterate those for you readers out there, or audio book readers. Catcher in the Rye, the old classic, came up. I love that we can share nonfiction and fiction books as well. I know for me personally, I love reading nonfiction. I love feeding my brain that way, but I love taking a break from that too, and just getting into a great fiction book. Shared Sisterhood, was another book that came up through these conversations. Dopamine Nation. That's probably going to be a one that you want to put your phone down after reading. But Nick also shared The Sacred Cow, which looks at the current food industry, and then also one that's come up on the show before, the 5 a.m. Club. I think one consistent theme through almost all of the guests that I've had on the show is they're either readers or they're trying to implement that in. I think that's something that gets overlooked, is continuing to feed our brain new information, because that's one of the ways that we keep our brain thriving, So if reading isn't a thing for you, I would encourage you to try to find the time to make time for it. One thing that I have done is implemented audiobooks as I'm driving. I'm still struggling to find the time consistently to read on my own, but I'm really enjoying listening to audiobooks when I'm in the car. So if you haven't already given that a try, I would certainly encourage you to do that. And while we're talking about books, I'm going to share one that I just finished called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. And that is an eye-opening book. This is definitely written from, he's a pastor, so there's a faith element to it, but it's not, pushed down your throat for people who aren't Christians out there. Don't follow that faith. It's not a pushy, on the faith side of things, but this is a pastor who, basically had a breakdown. He was just burning his candle at every end, and reevaluated life, and it's just a great book. I would encourage it. It was recommended to me, and I would recommend it to all of you. So this has just been a great journey. These last 3 episodes have been fantastic, but this journey as a whole is helping me to stay determined, to stay focused on a long-term goal. And even in the midst of a busier season of life, this remains a priority for me. It remains a passion. This show in itself remains a passion for me. So I appreciate the encouragement. I appreciate the feedback. I hope that these shows are helping you to continue down your journey of pursuing your passions. So thanks again for being along on the ride, and we'll talk to you again soon.
If you have questions or would like to contact us, please check out the show details for contact information. Thanks for listening to the Pursue Your Passion podcast.